Chapter 23, Section 2. And it's called The Reign of Terror, or that revolution brings about some reform, but also quite a bit of terror. And this revolutionary government of France made some positive changes, but they also did some really creepy stuff to stay in power. And so first, I'd talk about some of the positives here. And we'll begin with the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen. This was kind of France's formal new constitution. Guaranteed basic freedoms like speech and religion, and it contained a basic Bill of Rights. And the slogan of the revolution is an inspiring one: liberty, equality, fraternity, freedom, equality, brotherhood. You know, that we are all equal in France, rich and poor, white and black, of many different races. We're all equals. We're all brothers. The great slogan of the French Revolution. And the Declaration of the Rights of Man contained these basic freedoms that all French citizens enjoy. And it really is that inspiring moment, like when you read the Constitution and you go, wow, this is an amazing thing. The National Assembly also took over all lands belonging to the Catholic Church. If you remember, the Catholic Church made up 1% of the French population, yet controlled 10% of the lands in France. So the National Assembly took all those lands back. The Catholic Church lost all its political power in France. The state would now control the church. And this was actually a controversial move, because with the state telling the church what to do, there's no separation of church and state. The state is going to control the religion of France. And many French people were devoutly Catholic. You know, your average French citizen today is still Catholic. They are just traditionally Catholic. They've been Catholic since Clovis. So, I mean, they're going to resent the state taking over control of the church. Meanwhile, Louis XVI, the Sun King, the big fancy painting I showed you yesterday, he has a good reason to be worried. And the French peasants are storming castles and palaces everywhere. So he attempts to escape. I mean, he's like, well, I'm going to get out of the country, and hide out in Vienna, in London, and any number of countries with monarchies that would probably allow him a safe harbor. But he and his family are caught by the revolutionaries on the border of the Netherlands, attempting to flee the country. So, in September of 1791, the Assembly finished their constitution. A new body of law was created. A new legislative group was created called the Legislative Assembly. But there were deep problems from the beginning. And some of these were everything from debt to food shortages to problems that the monarchy had left. So, King Louis compounded the French debt to crazy levels. And just because there's been a regime change, now there's a new form of government, the debt doesn't go away. France still owes money to other countries, and they're going to have to figure out a way to pay it back. Okay, so France was starving before the revolution. Well, here's another problem. Killing rich people does not fix the problem of a food shortage. It's not that simple. You've got to get, things going again. And so, meanwhile, the new lawmaking body was also divided. Because it's one thing to complain, It's another to actually come up with a solution to a problem. Okay, so we've killed all the rich people, now what? Well, you've got some people who want to take this to the full-on next level, and let's kill all rich people. Let's implement some form of communism. You've got some moderates going, maybe let's just kill some of the rich people. maybe we can kind of work things out here and come up with a peaceful solution. And then you've got conservatives that want to put the king, or at least maybe not Louis, they cut his head off, maybe someone in the royal family, let's put the monarchy back. So those were the conservatives. So you've got a lot of division within this new lawmaking body. There were a number of nobles. I mean, okay, so they're killing all the rich people. What are rich people going to do? They're going to get out of the country. And they're probably right to do so. So many immigrant nobles who fled the country were living in exile in places like Spain or in the Holy Roman Empire or in Britain or maybe in the New World. And, well, of course, they're hoping that the monarchy is restored. But the sans-culottes were members of the lower class who wanted more change from the revolution. So here is a painting of a Parisian revolutionary.
Rise to power
Now, there were also problems with other countries. For one, the Austrians and the Prussians wanted Louis in charge of France. Louis was a member of the former royal family. Really, the other countries surrounding France wanted a king back in power. They believed that was the answer to the instability. And so Jose, actually, it turned out that these nations wanted a restoration of the monarchy so badly that they went to war with France. And meanwhile, within France, the royal family was placed in jail. And Parisian mobs stormed the prison where the royal family were being held. They killed the guards who were watching over the royal family. And they killed over 1,000 people in different prisons because they supported the king. And finally, the Legislative Assembly formally deposed the King of France under direct pressure from the mob, and the new French Republic was formed. Now, there was another concerning thing that we had to deal with here, and that was the new government. See, France's revolutionary history gives us kind of a dark example of what can go wrong. You see, people were very afraid. The surrounding countries tried to restore the monarchy, and the French mob stormed into the prison, killed anyone supporting the king, anyone who stood up to them, and they drugged the king out. And Louis XVI was found guilty of treason, and his head was cut off by a guillotine. The guillotine was a special machine designed during the French Revolution to cut people's heads off. You know, an executioner might miss. You know, there's actually a neat podcast on Dan Carlin's Hardcore History about the history of execution and torture. The executioner might miss. It occasionally happened. The executioner might not cut all the way through the head. That also happened from time to time. The executioner might not have the stomach for it. The crowd might convince him otherwise. There's all kinds of things that can go wrong with a public execution. So the guillotine was designed to be foolproof. Put the person underneath it, lock them in place, boom. And that's how the King of France was executed. This was during a regime known as the Jacobins, a radical political organization that were responsible for many of the changes in government in 1792. And so meanwhile, the war continued. See, all of these other countries wanted France to go back to a monarchy. Now the French army, being directed by the Jacobins, actually was very successful. They won several victories against the Prussians, the Austrians, and this actually prompted other countries, Britain and Spain and Holland, to join forces against France. Because the main concern was not that France was going to be an aggressor and hurt them. The main concern with these countries is Britain, Holland, Spain, Prussia, Austria. Guess who those countries were run by? They were run by monarchs, many of whom were related. These people had been intermarrying and having children with one another for centuries. And so their concern was that, well, okay, now France has killed their king, they cut his head off. What if people in our countries start having the same thoughts? So the National Convention, that is the new French government, ordered a draft of 300,000 French citizens to reinforce the standing army. The country itself was very divided. Again, you've got your moderates, you've got your conservatives, you've got your radicals. People aren't quite sure what to think about all of this. It's a very divided time. And when Maximilien Robespierre took over France, he essentially became a dictator. He was leader of the Committee for Public Safety. He said, look, my goal is to make France safe again. Well, safety, when a politician uses that word, it's often a convenient distraction from what they're really doing is taking away our freedom. You know, his stated goal was to lead, quote, a republic of virtue. In fact, this was a reign of terror. You see, a big part of his reign was killing off anyone who opposed him. Thousands died during this, not just the wealthy. In fact, more poor French people died at the hands of the guillotine than did rich people. Thousands died. Anyone who might have been loyal to Marie Antoinette. You know, that was the famous member of the royal family who the French people organized outside of the palace saying, "We have no bread." And she came out and said, "Let them eat cake." Oh, they didn't like that a whole lot. They killed her several times. Meanwhile, most of the people... I kid. Okay. Most of the people who died, again, in the Reign of Terror were the poor. So, it's a very unstable situation. A couple years after Robespierre took control, he was arrested, put on trial, and executed. So what you've got here is an unstable government. The king has been killed. The replacement government has been killed. We're drifting close to anarchy in France. Other countries are attacking because they're concerned that the instability in France is going to spread and affect their countries. And they're right to be concerned. So finally, in the Legislative Assembly, the moderates take control. They write a new constitution. There's a two-house legislature. There's a 5-person directory, which will function as the executive. And this new government appointed, guess who? Napoleon Bonaparte to be commander of their armies. Now, if you want to look for trends in history, ZK, first thing you look at is a revolution. The second thing you see are mass executions, if this goes badly. The third thing you see is military dictatorship. And this is the case in Spain. This has been the case in Mexico. Roughly, there was an unstable time politically in Mexico from about 1846 really until 1917. And so you can see this kind of repeated many times throughout history. But Napoleon was made commander of the armies.